In my past two shows, I've asked Anthony Albanese and Tony Burke whether someone earning $160,000 a year is in Middle Australia. In your view, are they in Middle Australia?
I think so, Andrew, and that's why we're giving every Australian taxpayer a tax cut. You know, I think of Middle Australia as the people who get up and work hard to provide for their loved ones and get ahead. And what we've been able to demonstrate here, and there were figures in the last couple of days of the Australian, a piece by Troy Bramston, showed the benefits for working families, the benefits for young people, the benefits for people in the care economy and blue-collar workers and people in the services sector where we're going to need workers into the future. And so what we've been able to do here is we've got a very firm focus on Middle Australia, people in the suburbs and regions, people who work hard to provide for their loved ones and get ahead, and that's what Middle Australia is all about.
There was a memorable exchange between you and Paul Keating reported in The Australian a couple of years back about your home area of Logan and his of Bankstown. Do you know what the average median house price in Logan and the average median house price in Bankstown is these days?
I don't have all of the averages for every town written on the back of my hand, Andrew, but I know that people are under pressure in both of those communities.
All right, let me tell you.
I'm very proud to represent Logan City. That's where I'm coming from you today. And I know that Paul was very proud to represent his community too. We both grew up in the communities that we represent. We're grounded in our local communities. And that's why I'm doing everything I can to deliver, not just for the workers of this community, but the workers of every community around Australia.
Well, OK, I'll tell you, I wouldn't expect you to know that. In Logan, it's $525,000. In Bankstown, it's now, wait for it, $1.2 million for a house. Does that surprise you, and does that give you a bit of pause when it comes to what constitutes well off in your city compared to what's well off in Sydney?
Oh, I do understand that in different parts of Australia, the pressures are different. In some parts of Australia, the pressures are more intense than others. But that's one of the motivations, frankly, for trying to get a much, much better outcome for Middle Australia is because people are under the pump. We understand that. And housing costs are a big part of the story. And the answer to that is not to just kind of curl up into a little ball and leave the old Stage 3 tax cuts in place, even though they dudded people on low and middle incomes, but to do something meaningful to try and help people who are under mortgage pressure and under housing pressure, whether they're homeowners or renters. And that's what we're trying to do here with our cost of living tax cuts for Middle Australia, is recognise those pressures, but more than just acknowledge those pressures, try and help people with them.
Now, Peter Dutton just said if elected, he'll reverse the right to disconnect law, assuming it's going to go through. What's your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, they had an opportunity in the Parliament to vote against this being a criminal matter, and they voted to leave that in place, and that just shows they'll always put politics before the working people of this country. You know, these right to disconnect laws are just about making sure that people get a bit of downtime, you know, a bit of time with their families and with their loved ones. It's a common sense change. It just says if it gets out of hand, you can go to the Commission. And it's all about recognising that our economy is changing, technology is changing, the workforce is changing, and we don't want people to have to be on call 24/7 and just to be paid for a fraction of that. So it's a common sense change. I know that there's a range of views. I know the Coalition will play their usual nasty and negative politics about it. But I think the Australian working people of this country know that we're trying to make sure that as our economy and our society changes and as work changes, we want people to be beneficiaries rather than victims of that change. And sometimes that means closing loopholes or doing the sorts of things that we're proposing with the right to disconnect.
And just finally, you would have seen this incident involving Barnaby Joyce during the week. You yourself have said you probably overdid it on the drink before in an article last year. Do you have a reaction to this? Should he go from the front bench, do you think? I should point out you hardly drink at all now. I haven't had a drink for more than 4 years now, Andrew. I think that question that you asked me is really a matter for the National Party. I know that people will have a view about it. I know that people will have their fun with it. From a personal point of view, I don't like to see anyone in that state. You know, I find it a little bit disturbing. And so I'm not going to take shots at Barnaby about it. He needs to explain it, and I'll focus on doing my job. Treasurer Jim Chalmers, thanks so much for the chat this morning. Thanks, Andrew.